Let's go into some news. Way, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Up first, NXT TakeOver in your house. Was this on in your house on Sunday night? And if so, did you have any strong thoughts 24 hours later?
It was on, not on Sunday night, but Monday morning, late Sunday night. And I thought it was an enjoyable show, but, I wouldn't say one that felt of the very high standard of maybe some of the more memorables, NXT in your houses, NXT takeovers, I mean. Great main event, fantastic main event. I really like the opening 6-man tag as well. Everything else in the middle was just kind of like, nothing was bad, but I wouldn't say there was anything. It felt slightly beneath TakeOver level. But again, that you're talking about a very high bar.
It's a very high bar. I would say if you're assessing the entire show, to me, it was well below I would say the upper echelon of takeovers and probably even the median. That's not necessarily a slight. This in a vacuum was a very good show. I echo what you say about the main event was terrific. I loved the main event. And my one concern going into that match was with, that was the big match on this show. You've got 5 of your big faces of the brand. And I'm thinking, God, are we going to get 45 minutes here with these 6? 26 minutes was a perfect length for this match. I thought they utilized Karrion Kross the way you would want to use him in that type of a match. I thought the Cole and Gargano, some of the double team spots that they did, I would love to see a tag run out of those two at some point. And I think as much as people are talking about that, when people get moved up to the main roster and Paul Levesque's talking about, well, it doesn't always mean someone's leaving just because they lose a big match. I think one of the things that we kind of took for granted with NXT is that there was always that constant cycle that no one got complacent, even high level guys. It was always a refresh of those main event roles because as soon as someone was big, the window was 2 years max and you're moving on. And then it creates that need to make new stars and it's constantly evolving. It's exciting to see new names in those places. That's the story of the main roster for this whole generation is that you make it to a spot, you're there for life. It's like a Supreme Court judge being appointed. The Miz is going to be in the Miz's spot until the day he decides not to. Dolph Ziggler. Tonight on Raw, they're talking about this is Jeff Hardy and John Morrison's first singles match on Raw since 2007. It's what are we talking about here? 14 years ago, they had a singles match on Raw. And with NXT, you now there's a lot less of those talents that are moving on. And you look at someone like Adam Cole, who's terrific, but it's also to the viewer, I think you look at him that he's done everything at this brand. And what more is there to do? I watched this match and I at least saw an alternative that at least you could segue him off to a bit of a tag run and it can really revitalize you, even though, terrific performer, but story wise, it just feels like he's run the gamut of winning the title so many times. And I just think that that's something that NXT, it was actually an advantage that talent would move on and you're constantly going through that evolutionary process.
Yeah, there's certainly pros and cons to being able to retain the stars that you've developed up until this point. But, one of the hallmarks of NXT, I mean, it's in the name, it's always fresh. You're always looking for something new. We can't really discount the idea that they can change characters. I think that's almost more important, and maybe the sign of a promotion being a real promotion rather than just, having this sort of, whether you do call it a benefit or a disadvantage of constantly having to cycle through your talent. I want to see an Adam Cole evolve, the way we're seeing. I think they're attempting, with a Kyle O'Reilly, for instance, trying to evolve his character a little bit. But, Tommaso Ciampa seems to be taking that role right now. I mean, to an extent, Johnny Gargano as well, pairing him with tag team partners. But, it means there's going to be, I guess, that one last spot, for people up and coming from the Performance Center. But nonetheless, I do feel like we are sort of in a bit of a lull right now with NXT. At least that's the sense I get from general interest. And I feel like the show overall kind of reflected that.
Yeah, I thought Cameron Grimes was outstanding in the ladder match. I think hearing that was the one match where I thought the crowd did have an impression on me was you could see that Cameron Grimes has really gotten over to this audience. For the rest of the show, they were touting the fact that this is the most people we've ever had at the Capitol Wrestling Center. And granted, this was not Daly's place. You didn't have 5,000 people. But that said, like the crowd it didn't sound any different at all with more voices there or more people there. It sounded like the same kind of low energy performance center.
See, it sounded at times that they were piping in noise, but there were also periods where they sounded quieter than, a full-on piped-in NXT, or at least like, Performance Center or CWC type of crowd. So maybe it was like a combination of both, and they're kind of testing it.
They also seemed to all be masked. Like when you saw the crowd shots, it seemed like everyone was masked. And I'm sure that's, if they're telling people to be masked, that might impact people's desire to be chanting and being vocal.
Yeah, I'm sure that would probably be part of it as well. These crowds really do make a huge difference to the quality of some of these shows, especially when you're talking about NXT, and I think Full Sail being such a big part of that identity. But the big talk coming out of it, of course, is the William Regal thing. And do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Mackenzie Mitchell caught up with William Regal at the end of the night. What did you think of the show? Regal said, good show. And then lamented that there is more bedlam than I have ever seen here in my 7 years, and it's time for a change. Enough is enough, and it's time for a change. And that followed...
was this bedlam that bad? I mean, this man's been through
The man went through a whole summer of the random attacks that led to Aleister Black running wild. I mean, he's seen a lot in this NXT era.
Got it. Okay. He's not a young man anymore. Yeah.
But maybe he's tired of this stuff. It's just the same stuff every single week. We got to move on. So that goes into our next story, and that was... Fightful was the first one that reported that Samoa Joe had been at the WWE Performance Center recently, and then Dave Meltzer noted on his radio show Sunday night that Joe is coming back, and he is coming back to NXT, and Dave had said that it was told to him it would be a Regal-like role, and I guess that, coupled with the angle, is leading to everyone believing that Joe will... Whether he's coming in to replace Regal, to back up Regal, it seems like he will be in a role, obviously in NXT and probably tied to that story. The other question, I mean, there's a lot that comes with that of Samoa Joe coming back into the fold after he was released in April. And everyone's question is going to be, is this coming back strictly for an out-of-the-ring position, or is wrestling even an option for Samoa Joe? Because, of course, he did have those 2 concussions that in early 2020 that he has not wrestled a match since February. And that was one of the big questions when he was released. What is his status? Because he was only being used in non-wrestling capacities during that last year with WWE.
From a fan standpoint, I think that seems to be at the top of people's minds is, will we see Samoa Joe get to wrestle again? And a move like this seems to suggest, if it's true that he will be in a Regal-like role, I think it would seem to suggest that the answer might not be no, at least not for now. Which I think is, was met with a bit of disappointment from audiences that were hoping that we'd see some dream matchups involving him and people in AEW or New Japan or wherever else. But not knowing really the extent of the man's medical, background, I mean, this could very well be the best move for him financially in terms of, maybe future, like his ability to be a coach perhaps at the Performance Center. So, creatively, I think we could at least bet on NXT treating him better than what he had on WWE main roster.
Yeah, and I mean, as we talked about over and over when the release happened, there's so many different roles he can fill beyond just wrestling. I mean, you have someone that I thought took the commentary pretty well, and it was funny because right before those releases, the very week, he did those great sit-down interviews over the TakeOver specials, and I thought was a great fit for that kind of a role. So, I can see Joe, there's many, many options of how you can utilize him. And if there's anything that's been proven over the past 3 years, it's that someone not being cleared today does not mean someone will not be cleared tomorrow. So I don't think you can ever completely discount the future based on present status. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions with the Samoa Joe story, but, an interesting development to see him. And, further to that is when you look at all the available names out there, like does NXT become a option if they see somebody that, wasn't utilized well on the main roster, that there's an entryway into the side door through NXT where maybe they have a better idea of how to utilize someone.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just feel like so much of these types of moves really kind of make it feel like there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of communication between the NXT roster, higher ups and the main roster. You'd figure something like this wouldn't necessarily occur if there was a bit more communication. But of course, there's also maybe the element of what level of contract might be renegotiated with the move like this as well.